Hello, I'm Pat Miller. My husband Steve and I are retired engineers and communications managers at the former Bell Labs in New Jersey. Say hello, Steve.
Hi, yeah, my name is Steve Miller and husband of Pat, and we've been on this crusade of clean energy for almost 4 years. And my background is technology planning for Bell Labs, and we had like a 5-year maximum horizon. And this is so different. Now we're talking about the next 30 years. So this is a long range project. Back to you, Pat.
Okay. The two of us began this journey toward saving the world for our children and grandchildren a few years ago when we were trained as climate reality leaders and learned of the enormity of the climate crisis that we face. I'm going to share my screen and I have some slides to show you. Okay, here we go. All right. This week, we are participating with about 35,000 other climate reality leaders in a global campaign called 24 Hours of Reality, where each of us is asked to spread the word by giving a climate reality presentation. The first section of slides we're showing are provided to us by Climate Reality. These are based on research and verifiable facts, and references are noted in the corners of the slides. I will give this part of the talk. Then we have added our own view of what the clean energy future will be like in 2050 and what we need to do to get there, which will be given by Steve. Our work is advised by both Climate Reality and the Sierra Club Ready for 100 campaign, both nonprofit organizations. We founded the local organization Middletown for Clean Energy when we decided that we could make the biggest direct impact by working to drive our town and other towns around us toward 100% clean energy at the local level, with this mission of leaving a legacy of a livable world for our children and grandchildren. This is the world we're trying to save. This picture was taken from Apollo 17 in 1972. It's sometimes called blue marble. You're probably familiar with this. It reminds us that we are all connected and that our actions have an impact on our entire planet. And here's the reason that saving the world is so important to us personally, our two grandsons. And the baby on top is just turned 1 recently, so this picture is a few months old. This is a photo of the sun shining over the Earth's horizon through the atmosphere. The atmosphere is not vast and limitless the way it looks to us. In reality, there's just a thin shell of atmosphere a few miles deep. If you drove a car straight up, it would get through it in a few minutes. These are smokestacks burning fossil fuels, coal, oil, gas. The sky is now an open sewer, and we are spewing 150 million tons of heat-trapping carbon pollution into it every day. There are many sources of man-made global warming pollution: agriculture, forest fires, transportation, but the biggest source is the burning of fossil fuels. And as a result, the temperatures are going up very fast. It's unmistakably clear. And the scientists are telling us that this year already has more than a 70% chance of being the hottest year ever measured with instruments. Make no mistake, scientists agree climate warming is real, global warming is real, it is happening, and it is human caused. The fact is, 19 of the 20 hottest years on record have occurred since 2001, according to NASA studies. The hottest 5 are the last 5 years. Miami recorded its hottest week ever last June. Europe had the hottest year ever last year, and all of these countries have set all-time heat records. And in the world as a whole, it's useful to remember that 93% of all this heat goes into the oceans, and this disrupts the water cycle. We're seeing ocean temperatures also hit a new record last year, and almost certainly again this year. This makes ocean-based storms stronger and more destructive. When all that water vapor comes over the land, the precipitation events increase. And when it rushes back to the sea, floods and mudslides increase. In 2017, Hurricane Harvey's strength was driven up by waters in the Gulf that were up to 7 degrees hotter than normal. It stayed around for 3 days and left 30 inches of rain over southeastern Texas. This past May, this devastating storm in the Philippines affected 500,000 people. As the air becomes warmer, it can hold more moisture. The downpours get bigger and we get inland flooding. This is a supercell of rain over Montana. See the little tree in the bottom right? That shows you the size of this storm. They're calling these things rain bombs. We're also seeing the same pattern all over the world. As Pope Francis reminded the world powerfully, the poor are the ones most affected, and communities of color are most affected. Here in the US, the Poor People's Campaign is campaigning against ecological devastation, along with racism and poverty and the other evils they've identified. This is what parts of Tennessee looked like last February after torrential rain. You can't even see the houses. And here's a scene in New Jersey last year. If you look at the 10 counties most affected by flooding in the US, 81% of their population is minority on average. Farmers were hurt last year in the prime farmland of the Midwest. 20 million acres couldn't be farmed because of the massive downpours. There was $20 billion in damages. And the same extra heat that causes these rain bombs and floods also causes droughts by sucking the moisture out of the topsoil, so the droughts take place more quickly. And the drought this year in Europe, Poland has the worst drought in 100 years, and the Czech Republic, the worst in 500 years. Heat causes fires, and both have increased over the years. The US West has been on fire this year. Here's Arizona in June, And we know about the devastation in California and Oregon still ongoing. This was last year in California. And we've all seen this picture from Australia last summer, their summer. The reinsurance companies are pointing to all these climate-related disasters and their costs and telling us that this is completely unsustainable. The heat is also melting the ice in Greenland. This glacier, since 1935, has turned to water. NASA's estimate of the ice loss in Greenland shows us that it's 4 times faster than they had originally thought. The same thing is true in Antarctica, where the ice melting has accelerated dramatically. And when this massive amount of ice in those 2 regions melts, sea levels go up, and it's already rising. This shows cities most at risk from sea level rise based on dollars of assets. Miami is first. Our area, New York, Newark, is third. Most or all of the rest are in Asia and are highly populated. Anything we can do now to prevent or slow the worst will be much less expensive than after it happens. And it will save lives too. In New York and Newark, $130 billion of real estate assets are at risk. Sea level rise is the reason why this octopus showed up in a parking garage in Miami. In New Jersey at the shore, we also are experiencing what is called sunny day flooding several days a month during high tide. The US DoD predicts that climate change will lead to food and water shortages, disease, and more refugees. Such as these refugees that have been coming from the Middle East and Eastern Europe since the Syrian drought and war, or those coming to the US from Central America because of drought and political instability. The climate crisis is also a health crisis. Let's look at the pollution caused by burning fossil fuels. This map shows deaths from air pollution around the world. You can see that China and India are the worst, and next Russia. But Europe, the US, and Brazil are not looking so good either. This is what the air looks like in parts of China. People can't breathe it. It also makes people more vulnerable to the COVID-19 pandemic all over the world. The more the air pollution, the higher the death rate from COVID-19. And again, we see this pattern show up worse among minority populations and poor populations. Black Americans are dying at a rate more than twice as high as white Americans from COVID-19. We now risk losing both marine and land-based species to extinction. Many of these are critical to human life, such as the bees that pollinate a huge portion of our food crops. The #1 threat to the global economy. But there is hope, hope with a capital HOPE. We're not doomed yet. We can still dig ourselves out of this mess if we act now. We have the solutions at hand in the form of clean energy technology. Look at the growing capacity of wind energy. With any new technology, the growth is often vastly more than predicted. Wind energy is growing exponentially. New Jersey, along with other East Coast states, is committed to building an offshore wind industry. We have contracts signed and are ready to build as soon as we get permits. Solar is growing even faster than wind. Solar and wind are now cheaper than fossil fuel and getting cheaper all the time. The price of solar has been dropping for 40 years. It has dropped by 95% in the last 20 years alone. Batteries. Ideally, every wind or solar installation will be paired with battery storage to capture the excess energy when it is generated and feed it into the grid during less sunny or windy times. This shows historical growth of storage. And the projections forward show that this is a new trillion-dollar industry, which is going to make solar and wind even more useful. Now, let's look at transportation, the largest source of carbon pollution, responsible for almost half of all emissions. Electric vehicles have become increasingly popular in the last several years, and the price of EVs has come down to the point that in only 3 years from now, they will become cheaper than gas vehicles and will continue to drop while gas vehicles' cost continues to rise. All these companies are manufacturing EVs. All this new innovation means that clean energy jobs are growing in leaps and bounds. Solar and wind technicians are the two fastest growing jobs in the US, and they pay well too. And the companies that make them have plenty of professional jobs like engineers, designers, marketing, and IT. So this is the state of clean energy today. Now we're going to give our personal crystal ball prediction of what will happen in the next 30 years. And I predict we will have a clean energy economy by 2050. Why do I know this? Because we're motivated to save the world for our children. We must do it. And because people are demanding it. This is a picture of the global climate strike that happened last September and involved millions of young people and their adult supporters like us around the world. This is in New York City, which we attended to be able to hear 16-year-old Swedish activist Greta Thunberg speak. And the rising young Greta generation, they're leading the way. They are demanding a better world as they have every right to do. And maybe the most convincing reason of all, the market and the innovators will drive us to 100% clean energy. They're simply leaving the fossil fuel dinosaurs in the dust. Fossil fuel is a terrible investment. Many producers have gone bankrupt during the COVID crisis, and no doubt others will follow. We personally do not invest in fossil fuels, and many large funds do not either. I'm sure you know that in 2015, every country in the world joined the Paris Accord to get to zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And we in the US are still in, at least until November 4th, 2020. All these 24 states plus Puerto Rico are still in. And all these companies are still in. And now Steve is going to bring his view, or bring this view down to the state, local, and personal level, where we can and we are doing our part to get us and the world to 100% clean by 2050.
Thank you, Pat. So I'm building on Pat's slides, and I'm going to focus on what you in New Jersey can do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This pie chart shows the 105 million metric tons per year of greenhouse gas carbon footprint in New Jersey. The largest source by far is the green area at the top for transportation. That means that nearly half of New Jersey emissions result from you driving your car and the various trucks serving your needs and the planes for your trips, etc. Further down, 21% is emissions from your use of electricity. And about 30% is use of natural gas for heating in residential, industrial, and commercial applications. The outlier is the top right, negative 8% carbon sequestration. That's carbon absorption in the land areas such as marshland and woodland. New Jersey has dropped a little, but remains number 6 in the nation with solar panels installed on 2 million homes. And New Jersey recently committed to a goal of 7,500 megawatts from offshore wind turbines, which will supply 50% of New Jersey projected electrical usage in 2035. New Jersey has a host of clean energy activities. 2 years ago, Governor Murphy committed to 50% clean electricity by 2030 and 100% clean electricity by 2050. And now we have the Energy Master Plan released January of this year with details of how we will reach 100% clean electricity by 2050. New Jersey also rejoined the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. That's an electrical carbon cap and invest program, which yields New Jersey $80 million per year in its coffers to invest in clean energy and job creation. New Jersey also joined with 25 states, as Pat said, in the U.S. Climate Alliance, which will meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. The alliance is enormous. It includes over half the U.S. population and half the GDP and 40% of the U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. It aims for a 28% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2025. There are also many renewable energy laws and executive orders that increase the renewable content of our electricity, increase storage of solar, launch a community solar trial, which we're now in year 2 of 3-year trial, and we are launching our nation's offshore wind industry. And finally, New Jersey plans to have 330,000 electric vehicles registered in the next 5 years by 2025 and 2 million by 2035. So the New Jersey Energy Master Plan has 7 strategies shown here. We expect more public transport and charging stations everywhere to encourage electric vehicles. We will have distributed renewable energy among solar rooftops and big patches around New Jersey of community solar. We will make existing buildings efficient via insulation and sealing and upgrade appliances. We will install landscaping to reduce heat, conserve water, or provide food. We will have new and renovated buildings that will aim for all electric net zero carbon. We have environmental justice communities that will benefit from the clean energy transition with workforce jobs and training. Our electrical grid will be modernized via smart metering. This was just announced a couple of months ago. JCP&L and PS&G will have these smart meters installed, and that will allow time of day type monitoring and bi-directional grid flow, so we can have that solar on the rooftops flowing back out into the grid. And we will create a clean energy innovation economy. This will grow world-class research, create jobs, and include workforce training. Now, we had a Rocky Mountain Institute consultant working with New Jersey BPU to create the Energy Master Plan to identify the least cost way to realize the path to the 2050 goals. The path that was selected costs little to nothing, even assuming cost of renewables stays flat. But we saw in Pat's chart, renewables are continuing a very steep downward trajectory in price. And it also assumes no new technology for the next 30 years, which is remarkable considering the limitless number of things that we always are creating for technology support. So Middletown 2020 Energy Plan has goals that's implementable at the city level. This is based upon the New Jersey Energy Master Plan and on the New Jersey Global Response Act, as updated just this last year, and based upon Sustainable Jersey, which is currently providing a framework for green teams in 450 New Jersey cities to reach 100% clean energy. My first slide was a pie chart of total greenhouse gas emissions. For the Middletown portion, that applies to every person's town that's listening to this. You can do the same. We simply calculated the per person share of the overall New Jersey total from the big emissions pie chart. And Middletown's per capita share turns out to be 705,000 tons per year of greenhouse gas emissions equivalent. CO2 equivalent is shorthand for the gorilla CO2, which is the predominant emission, but then we have many rarer but more potent gases like methane. Now, the same principles can be ported to your town and to hundreds of other towns in New Jersey, and the results look similar for these 11 different classes of actions by 2050. In this case, we're showing the 2030 reductions, and because we get about 38% emission by reduction by 2030, and we project a 90% emission reduction by 2050. Both of these are in line with the Paris Agreement. The chart shows those 11 classes, and the most potent action and quickest to implement is the top dark green bar, which shows 100% clean electricity for residents of Middletown. The second bar in dark blue is the pollution caused by passenger cars. People will gradually buy electric vehicles as the EV prices drop and their own fossil fuel car wears out. But that's a gradual process. So the emission saving in 2030 is smaller than the electric curve at the bar at the top, and the bar then is shorter for the amount of emissions reduced. The purple is noteworthy. It's the second largest source of emissions that's used for heating by burning fossil fuel. In New Jersey, that's primarily natural gas. We project a slow, steady switch from fossil fuel to electric heat pumps by 2030, and that's the purple that you see. The dark brown bar is relatively easy to implement. Energy efficiency is cheap and pays off quickly. Homeowners receive a $49 energy audit for about two or 3 hours of somebody's time to assess the total energy profile of a house. And then the homeowner will know exactly what needs to be done to make the house energy efficient and lower cost to heat and cool. But businesses in New Jersey especially benefit. They get a free energy audit. And all the improvements that are required, they get 70% off. And the result is a payback within 2 or 3 years for business. So it's really something a business can't refuse. What am I to do? Well, switching to renewable electric supply has the greatest, quickest impact on your household's carbon emissions. And there are 4 ways that I've identified here to use. Uh, the first is to install rooftop solar. It's still a good deal and continues to be cost effective as solar prices continue to drop. Or in JCP&L territory, I have a table, my website electric.smiller.org, that takes you step by step how to choose a supplier using the best current deals that exist. I update every couple of months. Or you can wait a couple of years and you will have low-cost community solar available and allow you to subscribe to these large patches that will be distributed across New Jersey. Or ask your town to supply renewable electricity to all residents and all businesses. And how do you do that? How do you ask a town? Well, create a rallying cry, just as we do in Middletown, to influence your town. We have a Clean Energy for All, Sierra Club Ready for 100% campaign. Other organizations have something very similar. So we're working toward a grassroots town, our own town, to adopt clean energy. In this case, the legal name is Renewable Government Energy Aggregation. In other states, it's called community choice or community power. Your town becomes your electric supplier. The town hires an energy consultant who shops for the lowest renewable electricity to supply the entire town. History among many towns that have followed this process shows there is a small savings, 5 or 10%, while simultaneously having the benefit of increasingly higher renewable content, getting up to 100% renewable energy. Just a little side story, because of our campaigning this year, Middletown finally shopped for the electrical contract for all the city buildings, around 80 accounts or so. And they found, when they shopped, they got a 10% electric cost decrease and got 100% renewable electricity. So they started in June of this year for the very first time, and they praised themselves with a big press release. 10% electric cost and renewable electric to boot. So they were happy and we are happy. And so now we're asking Middletown, hey, you did this for yourself? Now apply the same benefits for residences and businesses, please. So we should also take advantage of state and federal rebates to buy electric or plug-in hybrids. And we should be looking in the next 3 or 4 years for prices that are less than that of buying a fossil fuel car. What you do is take the car, recharge your electric vehicle with your household renewable electricity, and magically you have zeroed out 70% of your household total emissions. The way I get that is about 50% of your emissions are transportation, which you've now powered by electricity, and your electricity is renewable, and that's another 20% straight, so 70% total. Pat and I bought a Toyota Prius hybrid. We, about 2 or 3 years ago, we have achieved 145 miles per gallon, over 29,000 miles of driving, and mostly charge the car from our own house electricity, which is from Texas wind power. So by 2030 and even especially by 2050, we will see all of these changes happening. We will see building standards will be upgraded to zero emissions. And as appliances and furnaces wear out, they will be replaced by electric heat pumps. Electric heat pumps are cheaper to operate because renewable continues to drop in price. And while fossil fuels will increase in price as the government increases the fee on carbon. There are many, many more EV charging stations in the future. There will be longer range, faster charging batteries. Plastic packaging that we so lament now is cluttering the oceans will be cut way back, and more people will adopt plant-based diets like Pat and I have done for many years. So In closing, which path will you choose? Oil and gas money or our children's future? Speak up, act, and vote like your world depends on it. Because it does.